Tom, we spent a little bit of time today talking about the story, I guess, the Andre Fortin, the Liberal health critic, getting up and talking about the fact he would like to see organ donations in this province, because we're not doing apparently that well, develop an opt-out as opposed to an opt-in strategy. We took a lot of calls on this. Fair to say, Natasha, opinions split?
Very divided and very passionate. It kind of surprised us, Tom.
It is such a sensitive personal issue. I'm not surprised that it was very divided, but one way or the other, you have to make a choice, right?
Yes.
So if you're going to opt in, that means that you have to check something off and say, I've thought about this. I want, something happens to me and something in my body can save somebody else's life, by all means. And then there are others who just don't want to do that. But that's fine. Somebody who doesn't want it will be able to say, by this opt-out rule, they'll be able to say no. So it comes out to the same thing, but the presumption will be in favor of openness, of being able to provide perhaps a life-saving transplant to somebody else. So I think that overall, that's the right track to be on. But I do understand that there are a lot of people who feel differently, but if they're that hesitant, of course, they'll have the absolute right to opt out.
So that's where I stand, and the whole people got very up in arms about it, my body, my choice, and I was like, the choice is still there, and I think the right choice, like you, is to donate your organs. But what really came out, Tom, was a total lack of trust for the government. People just don't want the government to have their hand in this at all.
Well, if you get to that point on something so literally vital, where you don't trust the government, what's left, right? I mean, it's going to be a very simple system, and you can put it into your own will. By the way, there are ways to do this on your own, and already now. And, people are doing living wills about all sorts of things, and you go see your notary, and they'll explain to you exactly how to do this. So I understand how sensitive it is, and I'm not going to try to impose my view on anybody on something this morally fraught. But I do think that to the extent that you have 100% the choice, I don't see why not.
Yeah, what you just said now, I think a lot of people, based on the calls we took and texts we received, this idea of, the government sort of imposing anything on anybody is the fact. It didn't matter what it was. It's just this idea of governments getting involved.
The government,
exactly.
Yeah.
So, but you're right. It is personal. It is one of those things you decide on your own. Tom, let me move on and get to this other story. I know we've not talked about this really at all today, this Michael Chong situation and the fact that this government, the Liberal government, knew what was going on and chose to do nothing about his particular case. Can you fill us in?
Very disturbing. And again, this is great journalism by, amongst others, but especially, Bob Fife, who I know that you interviewed in a very important moment, because I've had a chance to quote his interview with you on national media several times, because Fife's take on a lot of this stuff is, why didn't Trudeau do anything? And the answer was because the whole thing was to the advantage of the Liberals. But I can't understand for the life of me why Michael Chong wasn't at least informed of what was involved here. I don't know if you've ever had a chance to meet him, but I worked up close and personal with Michael Chong, one of the most wonderful people you'd ever hope to have a chance to work with in politics. Just solid values, straight up guy, fun to be with, super smart. He's brought in some changes. He brought in a private members bill that was adopted and brought in, changes to give more power to the caucus members and things like that, the average MP. So he's really got his thinking cap on, this guy. And I loved his reaction, because he did not go white hot. He didn't go over the top. He just said, but this is my family. I would have thought that the government would have taken the time to explain to me what was involved and at least inform me. So good for him for the quality of his reaction. But very bad on the Trudeau Liberals. It adds into the whole thing. It has to do with the Trudeau Foundation. It has to do with Chinese government interference in Canadian elections, and on and on. So Trudeau is still trying to duck. I remember when they brought in Katie Telford, his chief of staff, and she wouldn't answer any questions, and trying to be solicitous and say, I love Parliament and I love MPs, but I just won't answer any of your questions. I mean, Trudeau's got a lot to hide on this one. There's no other way to look at what we've had as information for the past several months. And of course, he's going to try to skip out on this one as well.
I believe I just read that Sacha Trudeau is expected to testify tomorrow. Are you expecting anything to come out there?
No, he'll be well prepared. He'll have spent some time, getting his testimony prepared, probably with a seasoned lawyer to, watch out for this, watch out for that. And the past sometimes being the guarantee of the future, you can be pretty well certain that the conservative official opposition will completely blow themselves up because they don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
They're just so
Yes,
awful.
so true.
I mean, it's unbelievable. It's painful. They're sort of going, you're an important institution. You're the official opposition. Your number one job is to hold the government to account, and you're ditherers. Somebody gives you something, says, can you deliver this? And the answer is no, I'm going to talk about a bunch of other stuff and ask questions that make no sense and just blow myself up. So I'm worried about that because Sacha Trudeau's a smart guy. He's going to come away, waving it off. The Trudeau Foundation stuff, by the way, last week on Friday, the former president, when she was speaking, she was very clear that there were some very disturbing things that had happened. She asked the people of the Trudeau Foundation who were there at the time of the donations from those Chinese billionaires with direct connections to the Chinese Communist Party. She had said, you people should recuse yourself. That's a fancy way of saying, you should just avoid taking part of this discussion. You're in an obvious conflict. And when they refused to step back, she resigned and 8 other members of the board resigned. And so it's always the same cast of characters, very close to the Liberals, very close to Trudeau. And, they were given $125 billion. Sorry, million. 125 billion would be a lot. $125 million of public money to hand out. And last year, to hand out $2.4 million in bursaries and scholarships, it cost them $2.4 million in expenses. So it's just a mess. And this thing, the money should just be given over to one of the funding arms for higher education and research and just collapse this foundation, which is just an embarrassment.
Entirely wash your hands of it. Yeah. All right, let me go back to, we now know that strike has been settled, but I came across something in here that I thought was interesting because one of the issues at the outset in the public service strike was this idea of being able to keep working from home. And we find out now that in the final agreement between the Treasury Board and the union, that's not enshrined in that agreement, right? This is going to happen on a sort of private person-to-person basis?
Yeah, almost an ad hoc basis. So Mona Fortier, she held a rather long press conference yesterday. She was quite good. And, the question kept coming back, and she must have said a half a dozen times, it's not in the collective agreement. It's in a side letter. And we're saying we're going to look at this, which is a smart way to do it. We're coming off 3 years of pandemic when people were working from home a lot. As managers, they didn't want to give up that management right to make that determination because it can be very different from one place to the other. And you don't want to create a precedent and be told that it's now in the collective agreements. And by the way, employers across Canada in the private sector were keeping a close eye on this because that's the last thing that they wanted as well. So I think that Fortier did an outstanding job. She's one of these lesser-known figures, but boy, she really stepped up to the plate. She got this thing done. I think that Trudeau comes away really in a great position on this. He looks like a good manager. He gets a deal. The unions are not angry with him. So overall, I think it's been a win-win for Trudeau, and it's largely thanks to Mona Fortier.
Canada's next Prime Minister, Mona Fortier. There you go. Thank you, Tom.